We are moving into period 2, and as you notice, this is the time period of 1654. We are moving into the time period of 1607 to 1754, period 2, and we're going to start looking at the colonization, especially by the British. We'll go back to the Spanish colonization a little bit, but then it's going to move into British colonization. So the Spanish, French, Dutch, and British colonizers had different economic and imperial goals involving land and labor that shaped the social and political developments of their colonies, as well as their relationships with native populations. Remember, differing groups who came into the Americas had different relationships. Not each and every European group that came into encounter had poor relationships with native populations. Spanish efforts to extract wealth from the land led them to develop institutions based on subjugating native populations. That word subjugate, like make them subjects, force them to do labor. Converting them to Christianity and incorporating them along with enslaved and free Africans into the Spanish colonial society. So Columbus, there's Columbus up here in this picture. You know, remember in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. He is the one who landed in the area that we know today as like Haiti and the Dominican Republic. He called it Hispaniola. This is why native Indians are called Native Americans are called Indians, because he thought he reached Asia or India, which he was intending to go. Cortez, he conquered the Aztec Empire, including Tenochtitlan, what we know today as Mexico City. Pizarro was a conquistador that took over in the Incan Empire, further down in South America. So these conquistadors were these explorers who came and basically conquered areas for their native country. Usually Spain, sometimes Portugal. Later we're going to see the French and the Dutch and the English all doing these same types of things. So the mission system was set up especially by the French, and then later by the French as well. But the mission system was this part of the 3 Gs. Remember, the 3 Gs were God, gold, and glory. The mission system was set up to use Catholic priests to spread Christianity. And oftentimes they kind of tried to implement the encomienda system. Now, as we heard from Bartolome de las Casas, not necessarily by enslaving the people, but using them in a labor system. New Spain is this whole area of, picture the western part of the United States, all the way from pretty much California, Nevada, maybe even parts of Utah, down and straight south. So Arizona and Texas and New Mexico and all this area of the Southwest, that was all considered New Spain. And we're talking pretty late into the 1500s that this is established that far north. I mean, the Spanish are moving further and further to the north. And eventually Santa Fe is established. That's established by Juan de Onate, and you heard that story that we relayed earlier about, he took over, he conquered, he captured, and in retaliation for some of the killings that the Indians had done in that area, he captured them and cut off the foot of many of the captured, imprisoned people. All right. French and Dutch colonial efforts involved relatively few Europeans and relied on trade alliances and intermarriage with American Indians to build economic and diplomatic relationships and acquire furs and other products for exports to Europe. The French and the Dutch did this. The British and definitely the Spanish did not do this. Remember, the Spanish had that very set hierarchy of class system. The French and the Dutch, not so much, especially the French. Like this guy up here, this is Samuel de Champlain. Sorry, I was losing my train of thought. He would have been a type who would have saw the benefit in intermarriage. So Samuel de Champlain is kind of the father of New France. New Netherlands was established by the Dutch. What we call the New Netherlands was New Amsterdam. That's New York today. So the Dutch came over, they found basically, this huge area that they named New Amsterdam in New York City. They said, hey, can we buy this land? And Native Americans were like, okay. To Native Americans, the idea of land ownership was completely foreign to them. And so when they said, okay, we'll sell this land that we have to you, they didn't think it was a permanent arrangement. And to the Dutch, they did. And so we'll see what happens kind of as time goes on when the Dutch actually have to sell their arrangement, their territory to the British colonists. The French alliance with the Hurons, this is especially in the fur trapping area. It was a huge business, and the French were really good at fur trapping. And then the Huron tribe, they had a lot of buying and selling back and forth. They would give them metal traps, and they would give them guns in exchange for the furs and things that the Hurons could have, because the French are big on fashion and they loved these animal furs and really any kind of fashionable thing that could be made out of an animal. So English colonization then. So we know that the Spanish were really colonizing in the far southwest. The French were colonizing up closer toward Canada and the northeast, think about where Ontario is today, in Quebec, where kind of the border between Canada and the United States happens around New York. And the Dutch are somewhat in New York, and then come the British. So English colonization efforts attracted a comparatively large number of male and female British migrants, as well as other European migrants, all of whom sought social mobility, economic prosperity, religious freedom, and improved living conditions. So I do want you to look at these words right here. There are many reasons why Europeans came over to the United States. Social mobility was a big one. They wanted to get higher in their social status. Prosperity, religious freedom. There were things happening after the Glorious Revolution that they wanted some more freedoms and improved living conditions. So these colonists focused on agriculture and settled on land taken from Native Americans from whom they lived separately. So Jamestown, this is the first one that I really want to get into, and this is where I want you to put a date. Jamestown is 1607. So we consider the beginning of this period in 1607 the start of the first British colony in what we know today as the first 13 colonies in Virginia. So Jamestown was the first British settlement in the New World. Shortly after its founding, John Smith took command. Now, if you know anything about John Smith, he was not exactly a very well-liked guy. He had a quote that said, "You don't work, you don't eat." And part of that goes on what had happened in the starving time. The starving time was the first winter in which the Jamestown settlers lost like 2/3 of their population because they literally starved to death. They did not they didn't interact with Native Americans, so they didn't have any advice or ways to adapt to that environment, and literally most of them died. John Smith comes, I think it's just the following year, and he says, "You don't work, you don't eat." And so he had a really kind of strong work ethic to motivate the settlers to live. Another big motivating factor for the settlers is the headright system. So the headright system was this like English policy that was set up that said, if you basically sponsor, if you will, like if you pay for somebody to come to the new world, the new colonies, the new British colonies, we're gonna give you 50 acres. Which in your head you should be like, how could the British give land in another area to people who, you know, like, it doesn't even make sense. But the idea was, if you can basically take you and your family, and then also like somebody who will come and like, not necessarily from, maybe work with you, or maybe you just like want to take care of them, maybe it's like your niece or something, you bring over somebody to help the population grow and expand and progress, and your England is going to give you 50 acres of land, because you know that's like a lot of land. And so a lot of people came through into the United States, or came through the Atlantic Passage through the headright system. Now, we will get into something called indentured servitude, and so the headright system was kind of a backfire, because it produced a lot of indentured servants, and we will talk about that. It wasn't necessarily the greatest plan, or necessarily the greatest thought out plan. John Rolfe, you can see John Rolfe right here. I'll move this up. By the way, this picture right here, this is the starving time, that first winter. This is John Rolfe. If you've watched Pocahontas and you're a fan of Disney movies, you know he married Pocahontas to basically make peace with the Powhatans. He was much more liked. He's in the Virginia colony. But the important thing to remember about John Rolfe is what he did for tobacco. John Rolfe made like a commercially viable, sweet blend of tobacco. And this kind of changed everything. He developed and expanded the tobacco as a cash crop, and it was grown in Virginia. And basically they would use it, and they would grow it and harvest it and send it back to England. And England was like, this is the greatest thing ever. Couple things that I need to tell you about tobacco as a cash crop. When I say cash crop, I hope you know what that means. It basically means you're not growing it just for yourself to use. You are growing it for large masses of people. You're growing it to sell. And so that's what John Rolfe kind of was able to develop, because before they had tobacco, but they probably couldn't develop it on a large scale. So he bred this kind of sweet tobacco. Europeans believed that smoking, actually, like smoking cigarettes, was good for your lungs. And so this became like, I know it sounds stupid, but this became like a medicinal like thing. Like, people were using this to be healthy when they actually didn't know it was killing your lungs and filling them with tar. Although the carcinogens that are added are actually what's giving you tar. But they actually thought it was really good for your health. And so Europeans just were like in love with this new tobacco. It was very popular with rich people. It was like a sign of wealth and status if you were able to and could afford to smoke. It traveled really well. Tobacco doesn't really mold or rot as long as you harvest it and you kind of like lay it in these almost sheets. It traveled really well, and it wasn't extremely heavy. And so in the Columbian Exchange, tobacco is a very big product. I mean, like numero uno to go back to England and to the Old World. And it didn't require skilled labor in order to harvest. Now, one thing about tobacco that you do need to know, it grew better in virgin soil, in soil that had not been touched, soil that had not been cultivated, soil that had not been previously grown on. And so when you take this brand new soil and you dig it up and you like plant for the first time, that's where the soil did the best, or that's where tobacco did the best. Now think about this. Where soil where tobacco grows the best in this brand new soil, there's only so much brand new soil. So you see what's going to happen, right? Now, this is happening right on the coast of Virginia, right near, like, right along the coastal regions of Virginia. Well, there's not interaction between Native Americans and new British colonists. But as this tobacco starts getting to be more and more economically booming, like feasible, and this product is taking off, they're going to look for more and more virgin soil. That means what? They're going to move further and further inland, away from the tidewater, away from the coastal regions, and that means you're going to come into conflict with more and more Native Americans. So I'm going to stop right there. I just wanted to get through these first couple of slides, and we'll pick up from there next time. Bye.